Modern racing games look absolutely incredible. I mean, we've got photorealistic lighting, hundreds of perfect, licensed cars, crazy cinematic effects. They're technical masterpieces. But for so many of us who grew up with the genre, there's this nagging feeling that something really important is missing.
And that leads us to the big question we're going to dig into. Why is it that these games, which are objectively better in almost every way, just don't create those same lasting memories? You know those intense feelings we got from the older, kind of janky titles? Well, let's investigate. So yeah, today's games are these unbelievable showcases of technology. But a lot of us find ourselves looking back, almost fondly, to the racing games of the early 2000s. They weren't nearly as pretty, for sure, but they felt more intense, right? More memorable. They just felt more alive. Let's try and break down what that feeling really was.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the loss of personality. This is the first big clue. It's all about how the unique, sometimes flawed identities of those older games have been sanded down and polished into something, well, something a lot more generic.
I mean, this comparison really says it all, doesn't it? Games from that 2000s era, they just weren't afraid to have some rough edges. They committed to a specific vibe. Modern design, on the other hand, tries so hard to please everyone that it often ends up feeling, well, perfectly fine, but you forget about it the second you turn it off.
Just think about how unapologetic these identities were. Juiced was gritty, rough, and chaotic. Midnight Club was so fast it felt borderline unfair sometimes, but man, was it a thrill. Burnout was all about that glorious, reckless destruction. They picked a lane and they absolutely floored it. And that's exactly why we still talk about them today.
All right, next clue. Progress without purpose. This is a huge one. It's a fundamental shift in how we experience progression. It's not just about what you unlock anymore, it's about how you unlock it and what that journey actually feels like.
Think about it. In those older games, your garage wasn't just a collection of cars. It was like a physical timeline of your career. Every single car represented a chapter in your story, a struggle you overcame, a rival you finally beat, a victory that felt earned. It told your story. And that story? It was a classic grind. You started with some humble little car that you had to push to its absolute limits. You were scraping together every last bit of cash for every single upgrade. And then, finally, after hours and hours of work, you earned that dream car. The struggle is exactly what gave the reward its meaning.
Now compare that to today. A lot of modern racing games just flood you with high-end cars and tons of cash almost right away. Progress bars are constantly filling up. It's this non-stop stream of rewards designed to keep you hooked, but because you never really earn anything, nothing feels valuable. The destination arrives instantly, and the journey is completely forgotten. And that brings us to what might be the most important point of all. The moment danger disappeared. That tension, that real consequence that made every single race feel like it mattered. In so many games, it's just vanished. This, right here, is the heart of the whole issue.
Failure used to have a real cost. It had teeth. You could lose a race and lose money, forcing you to go back and grind it out in a slower car. You could literally lose your prized car in a pink slip race. You could make one tiny mistake on the final lap and it would cost you the entire championship with no do-overs. And because failure meant something, success felt absolutely exhilarating.
When you lay it out like this, the difference is just night and day. Consequences back then could seriously alter your career, setting you way back. Today, they're minimal, if they exist at all. You faced real financial penalties that actually hurt your progress. Now, pretty much nothing. And the big one, there were no safety nets, no rewind buttons to just erase your mistakes.
You know, the rewind button is the perfect symbol for this whole shift. Don't get me wrong, it's an accessible feature, and that's great. But it fundamentally removes the fear of failure. That heart-pounding, edge-of-your-seat tension of trying to nail a tough corner on the last lap, it's just gone, because you know you can undo any mistake in an instant.
So, you have to ask, why? Why did this all happen? Well, it's not just a bunch of bad creative choices. We have to look at the business of making games, the business of safe fun, because these changes are all tied to the economic realities of making these massive blockbuster games today. Making a AAA game now costs hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a huge investment, and to make that money back, you have to appeal to the biggest audience you possibly can.
That puts this immense pressure on studios to avoid anything that might frustrate a player and make them quit, especially in a live service game where keeping players constantly engaged is the #1 priority. And it all leads to this mindset. Punishing mechanics, a harsh progression system, the things we remember fondly, from a business perspective, those now look like liabilities. They're financial risks. So games become safer, cleaner, more polished, and almost inevitably a lot more sterile.
So where does that leave us? Are we just stuck with a future of beautiful but totally forgettable racing games? Well, not necessarily. The answer isn't to go backwards and make clunky old games again. It's about rediscovering that core ingredient that's been lost along the way.
The thing we all have to remember is that we don't recall these old games just for their mechanics. We remember them because of how they made us feel. That crushing sting of defeat after a long, hard race, and then the pure elation of finally beating that rival. That's what we're missing. The real emotional highs and lows.
So maybe the path forward is something we could call controlled chaos. The idea isn't to make games frustrating for the sake of it. It's about intelligently reintroducing meaningful consequences, giving games a strong, unapologetic identity again, and creating real stakes, all inside a modern, polished game.
So the final question is, can developers embrace an idea like this? Can they take a few more risks to inject that little bit of danger and personality back into the genre? Can they give us games that are not only amazing to look at, but amazing to feel? We can only hope.